We're live. And we have gorgeous camera quality.
We have to do our audio. Thanks everybody for joining.
And we're recording.
We're going right now. Our show on Thursday is playing on KBMF 102.5.
That's correct.
And we are now in that slot, per usual, doing our show to be recorded and played on KBMF
Thursday.
Next Thursday.
And check out this brand spanking new video quality. I mean, come on.
I haven't found it yet.
This is gorgeous. I just got I ordered a new back for my phone, which came with a new camera lens.
Wow. That looks nice.
Yeah. So, thank God we're going to have beautiful videos from now on.
I'm going to share this to my page. I didn't do it last week.
Yeah, do it. I'll share it a couple places too.
All right.
We'll hang out and wait for folks to show up.
Yeah, let's just wait for folks to show up, and then we'll do the hi, welcome to like radio part intro thing. How's that?
We don't have to wait too long. We've already got 4 watchers. Well,
very good.
Got
Lacey Yardy's
Kalina Miller
in the house.
Hello. Give us a text and tell us you're here, where you're streaming from. Maybe
Yeah.
it's Butte. I know we got people from all over the place.
We have our foreign correspondents that might chime in.
From Sweden and South Africa.
Yeah.
Although the South Africa correspondent doesn't get to watch the live video very often.
Sam Thompson said hello.
Oh, that's so sweet. All right. So what are we going to be talking about today on Post-Orthodoxy, Dark?
Oh, so many things. I think we're going to do a wrap-up of some of the things that I touched on in last week's show. What do you call that thing at the end? A coda? Is that a thing?
Well, a coda is something at the end of a song.
An addendum or something. What do you?
Wrap-up of reprise.
A reprise.
Yes.
Maybe further information on.
Would you turn the washing machine off?
Oh, jeez.
I just realized we can't record radio quality audio with a washing machine running, unfortunately. It's probably so close to being done.
Yeah.
Poor Sam.
All right. We don't have a washing machine at the radio station. It's easy to forget we're not at the radio station.
Yes, that's right.
Normal household activities must now cease, except for the dogs. You're going to hear the dogs clicking around
Clicking
the
and
house
clacking,
for the next 2
like
hours.
they usually do.
Yeah.
Sam Thompson says hello.
Yes.
Green Days is chiming in from Florida on twitch.tv.
Great Falls is in the house. Rick Booth.
Hey! Woohoo! Adrian Fletcher. I haven't seen Adrian Fletcher since I was 9, probably. You know those people, and then Facebook was invented, and then people started finding each other that they hadn't seen in a long time. So that's always a little exciting.
So we're going to talk about what happened last week, a little extra on that. We're going to talk about, last week I did talk about the Kairos, the term Kairos. I've gone down the rabbit hole a little bit with that one, and I want to talk about that in relation to the main topic of today's show, which is what?
We're kind of, like we said on our tiny bit of social media advertising that we did in advance, we're kind of going back to our roots a little bit. Post-Orthodoxy. Hey Rick, thanks for tuning in. Post-Orthodoxy is a radio show about changing our minds. That's our tagline. Our first tagline was the radio show about reality bubbles.
Yeah. Getting
out of reality bubbles or moving beyond reality bubbles. And there are certain things that are always hard to talk about. The big 3, sex, religion, and politics. And in Post-Orthodoxy, much like in copacetic conversations, we talk about those things a lot. But whereas in copacetic conversations, we weren't trying to convince anybody. We were just trying to get to know our neighbors in a very divisive time and learn how to have productive conversations about difficult subjects. In Post-Orthodoxy, we're getting to know ourselves and our assumptions and perceptions and presuppositions, and then realizing that other people have assumptions and perceptions and presuppositions, and that sometimes you think you're speaking the same language with somebody, but you're not understanding each other. And so on Post-Orthodoxy, Dark and I do a lot of interpreting from bubbles that we've gotten out of. For me, I tend to spend a lot of time talking with or about people in very strict religious reality bubbles, and Dark spends a lot of time talking with or about people in very strict political reality bubbles, where the world is only this way and it's not any other way, and that mindset prevents you from having effective communication with people you care about, or anybody.
Mm-hmm. So yes, I wanted to start off with a little further explanation of this Kairos idea, this concept of the Kairos. So John Vervaeke was a guy I was watching a couple of weeks ago.
Hey, you said it right the first time this
right?
time.
He has a YouTube series called...
Thanks for sharing, Greg. That helped us a lot.
He has a YouTube channel, and he has a topic that he's dealing... Oh, geez, I forgot. He has a topic about the meaning crisis. Or what we're dealing with right now is a meta crisis, in that it's crisis upon crisis. We have a breakdown in political norms, we have a breakdown in social norms. Now we have this this virus that has come through that is affecting every other level of order, is having to react to this Kairos, to this moment in time. So I'm going to read a little bit about, I'm just going to go straight Wikipedia on this. Kairos,
which everybody can do.
Right. It's an ancient Greek word meaning the right, critical, or opportune moment. The ancient Greeks had two words for time, chronos and kairos. The former refers to chronological or sequential time, while the later signifies a proper or opportune time for action. While chronos is quantitative, chronos is quantitative. Kairos has a qualitative, permanent nature.
Chronos is like this much time is passing, and Kairos is what shall we do with the time that is passing.
Yeah, it's a moment. It's a moment where something can happen, an opportune moment. So this word Kairos is used in philosophy, in rhetoric, in religion. In rhetoric, Kairos is a passing instant when an opening appears, which must be driven through with force if success is to be achieved. And that can be translated into archery terms. The Kairos is that moment where the arrow has the chance to hit the target best at the deepest penetration. So there's moments before and after where you might be able to accomplish the task, but not as directly and forcefully. In ancient Greece, Kairos was utilized by both the two main schools of thought in the field of rhetoric. The competing schools were that of the sophists and that of their opposition, led by individuals such as Aristotle and Plato. Sophism approached rhetoric as an art form. Members of the school would travel around Greece teaching citizens about the art of rhetoric and successful discourse. In his article, Toward a Specific Definition of Rhetoric, John Poulakos defines rhetoric from a sophistic perspective as follows. Rhetoric is the art at which seeks to capture in opportune moments that which is appropriate and attempts to suggest that what is possible. Aristotle and Plato, on the other hand, viewed sophistic rhetoric as a tool used to manipulate others and criticize those who taught it. And then a couple more things here. Hippocrates. Hippocrates?
No, Hippocrates, you got it.
I like saying Hippocrates.
It's Socrates because of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yes.
But it is actually Socrates.
Hippocrates' most famous quote about Kairos is, "Every Kairos is a Chronos, but not every Chronos is a Kairos."
I love these sorts of logical syllogisms and things.
There you go.
Great, say it again.
Every Kairos is a Chronos, but not every Chronos is a Kairos.
Not every moment in time is the opportune moment.
Exactly.
Not all oranges are fruit, not all fruit are oranges.
So, and then there's a little section here about Christian theology, which I kept to a minimum. in the interpretation of history, Neo-Orthodox Lutheran theologian Paul Tillich made prominent use of the term. For him, the Kairoi are those crises in history, see Christian existentialism, which create an opportunity and indeed a demand for an existential decision by the human subject. Let me read that again.
A demand for a decision?
Yeah. There are crises that create an opportunity for or a demand for an existential decision by the human subject.
Existential decision. Those are the sort of things like, why am I here? But instead of asking, why am I here, you decide, I am here because...
Yeah, right.
Existential decision as opposed to existential question.
Crisis, right. You're making a decision there. So, with all that said, when I heard this philosopher last week, social thinker last week, mention that term, it's been on my head. As we deal with what's happening in front of us right now, which would be a lot of people are forced to deal with COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to ignore COVID-19.
Right, you can't.
Right. So
what we said last week was the cake is a lie, your God is dead, but we didn't really say it that harshly.
Right.
And the king can't save you. Basically, COVID-19 doesn't care about religion or politics. It's going to do whatever viruses do, and religion and politics are now less powerful than that virus.
Yeah, everything has to respond to it. There's no higher authority on the planet right now, it seems. Is that a bold statement? Have I gone too far? Is there a higher authority on the planet than the virus? Is there anything else?
I don't think anybody can tell COVID what to do.
That's true.
So therefore, COVID is the most powerful thing on the planet right now. And I think that thought is really stressful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think it's really not only do I feel out of control at my job or out of control in my marriage or out of control because of my teenage daughter, now I'm out of control because there's a virus running the planet and I can't even trust God or country to save me.
So decisions have to be made. Existential choices are being made by everybody right now, to one degree or another. Mm-hmm. So I take the idea of the Kairos, virus as Kairos, and then layer it over current. And one of my favorite things to obsess on is politics.
Right.
So with this crisis that we're having in our political dialogue and political system, we've gone post-truth, some say, post-fact. So that makes productive discourse problematic. Mm. We have a partisan...
Post-truth as in a lot of people don't know how to know if something that they're reading or hearing is truth, so they just kind of go crazy.
Well, they say the thing that they, it's the
right.
George Bush thing.
Like there's no way of knowing.
I feel it in my gut must be true. So I think gut knowledge is its own thing.
It's very important.
But it's hard to have productive conversations on public policy with gut reactions. Because we all have different guts.
Right. And that's an important thing to realize. And that's something that we are going to talk about a lot today is like you were talking a bit briefly last week about that common sense isn't common anymore. A lot of people, especially of certain generations, like to say, well, kids just need to have common sense.
It's not the same thing.
And common sense is not the same now as it was 50 years ago because the world is completely different.
But we still play into expired tropes around what is common and what makes sense.
Right.
And those are the relics now to some degree. So I've been thinking about that. And I like how we're weaving this all together.
It just kind of happens magically.
Right. There was a comment thread that I posted about the COVID-19, and it is an interactive video of cell phones leaving the beach on spring break somewhere in Florida.
They picked like one section of
A
one
circle of
beach.
folks. A circle of folks. They circled it and then followed those phones when they left spring break to show the potential for virus spread for people who are not paying attention to the social distancing prescription that we've been given.
Right.
From government, peers, friends, states. Religions haven't been too strong on that social distancing thing because they're kind of like
right.
They're like rock musicians. They kind of depend on the gatherings for their money.
Right, and with all of the separation of church and state conversations, it's a little harder to crack down on churches and insist that churches need to be closed because you can't tell me what to do in my religion, even though you can tell all the artists you guys just don't get to make any money anymore.
Right. So I made this post, and there's been some discussions about politics. There's been some discussions about how people feel about people not dealing with this this idea of let's slow the virus down by making some self-sacrifice and changing our behavior for the benefit of our elders, especially.
Mm-hmm.
That's the general consensus that I feel like people are trying to push. So I wanted to read this comment from Gilbert Gilroy. I told him I was going to read it. He didn't get back to me and say no. So
that was your chance.
Right.
I mean, your Facebook timeline is public. That's kind of how I look at it. If somebody's commenting on a public post, then anybody can see it. But if they're commenting on a just friends post, then maybe consider asking them permission first.
So this is 2 big old long paragraphs from Gilbert on this video.
Billie Jean?
The social distancing thing. You have to stop walking around.
Run away.
Okay. Can we take the toy away, Billy?
We might have to. I'm going to put a bed down so she can at least lay on a bed.
Okay, I'm going to read this then.
Okay.
This is from my friend Gilbert, and
at least she's running around outside.
She's going to come back in with a squeaky toy again.
We'll just have to be very calm so she doesn't feel like she needs to participate in the madness.
Right, so I'm going to read in a calm... Once we start to get up there, she starts running around and squeaking toys.
Right.
So I'm going to try not to run around and squeak toys myself. And I'm just going to read...
Don't incite the toy squeaking.
I'm just going to calmly read this comment from Gilbert.
Very good.
I'm going to change my tone for the sake of the dog. The Floridians following the Bozeman Trail in their motorized covered wagons are a pilgrimage of arrogant fools. Gallatin County has almost half of the state's confirmed cases of COVID-19. Meanwhile, here in Montana, there's a growing movement of people that are suddenly concerned about their civil rights. The heavy-handed oppression of shelter in place is the last straw, and out of all the times in just the last year when it would have been appropriate, they've chosen this moment to demand their liberty. It's hard for me not to see the evolutionary journey of our species coming to an end without a rapid adaptation that removes the human head from its posterior. Without a rapid...
out the inside of its posterior?
Yes, exactly. Nobody can believe an event that impacts their daily lives can happen naturally. It's only out of the ordinary and hard to understand. It seems unreal. It doesn't make sense. They have a funny feeling something more is going on. And no, it's not just anxiety. They have premonitions. They're tuned in. They can sense it. They can read between the lines. They're not sheep. They can find the truth on the internet. That's how they found proof about the towers, and this is no different. 5G is mind control. China created the virus to get the upper hand in the trade war. Social distancing is preparing us for martial law so they can enslave us and make us work for them. Bah. So he's going down the rabbit hole from reasonable response, concern, to this sort of gut reaction, like, I feel that China created this.
Right.
I feel it.
Because it can't just be Mother Nature.
Right. So you have to make sense, right? Sense making. This is what I think our show, we should have a sense making hashtag, because that's a thing. People are trying to make sense of the times that we live in because they're not making sense in the old storyline, the old narrative.
Do you feel like things are making sense right now, guys?
So I'm going to read a second paragraph here. For the first time in history, the population of the world is about to pass the threshold Well, where there will be more older people than young people, more people beyond productive age than people of productive age. Japan has been there for a while. It's a major issue that needs to be addressed if we are to have a sustainable future, but no one talks about it, at least not in public. The recording of Bloomberg talking about what the future criteria for denying health care to the elderly will look like is telling. I'm sure there's already an equation for it that weighs human worth against economic impact, like the equations used for safety regulations and speed limits. It's not too much of a stretch to see Trump and the Trump Republicans' immigration policies and their stance against universal health care and the social welfare of society in general as being part of a eugenic ideology. Trump's belief in eugenics is well documented, and based on their actions, I have no reason to believe Republicans like Mitch McConnell aren't believers as well. Denying the weak, the sick, and the old access to health care and basic resources shortens their lives. To a eugenic capitalist, that has to make good economic sense and make their black heart go pitter-pat.
Eugenic capitalist.
Yes.
How would you define a eugenic capitalist?
Well, the older people who are not producing are just sucking. So it's a bad economic model.
We're speaking technically and factually, not emotionally.
We're talking eugenic capitalist.
Okay.
That's what he's saying. So the idea is you're no longer useful to society. There was a TV show
if society is just, can we make money off of it?
Well, economically. So there was a show in the 80s called Logan's Run. And it was this utopian society and nobody lived past 30. Once you turned 30, they terminated you. And then there were no problems because everybody was healthy, everybody worked. Anyway.
Nobody was getting drugs formulated for rats that only lived to 30 but then caused cancer after the age of 30.
Right. So that was one of the things that's what he's talking about with the idea of a eugenic capitalist. China creating a virus that for the most part only kills the elderly people with already compromised health in order to manipulate the world economy is absurd, and I'm sure they already have a much more efficient, less messy method for disposing of the elderly. When I have, with that, I have to rule China out as a suspect for what has to be the obvious, a conspiracy nut that's worried about FEMA trailers and population control, but I haven't seen it. Perhaps it's the main suspect with motive after China that has them avoiding it, which is the USA. He's basically saying
if China didn't start it, then maybe the US did, because it kind of seems like somebody started this, or at least a lot of people knew about the virus that shouldn't have known that a virus was coming, and it better be China because it can't be my country.
That takes me down a conspiracy hole, and I don't want to go down that hole.
I don't want to invalidate our conversations by saying things that make people so uncomfortable that they have to believe everything else we're saying isn't true also.
Right. I would like to add to that thing that there's speculation, and this is purely speculation, that there's been something like 1,600 CEOs resign within the last year, and a big spike that happened in January and February.
Right. Before the stock market started crashing because of Corona in the U.S.
So when I say CEOs, I'm talking about CEOs of Disney, Nestle, Lockheed Martin, IBM, Microsoft, Hulu, LinkedIn, eBay, MasterCard, Volkswagen, Harley-Davidson, T-Mobile. These are not small little corporations.
These are the CEOs.
The CEOs have all suddenly decided we're out.
Wow.
So there's speculation that CEOs are restricted from selling large shares of stock. There's speculation that they resign so they'll be able to dump all their shares or retrieve their interest in other countries' stock. So the idea is, and this is all before the stock market crashed. Suddenly all the CEOs cashed out. And this was happening 2019 and January, February. The spike of CEOs quitting.
And it's not just because they're all old.
Yeah, they're not old.
Yeah. And so what benefit do they have in suddenly not being CEO anymore.
Well, we can only speculate.
But we do know factually that when you're a CEO, it's something to do with your shares. Like factually, that's what
They're restricted from selling large shares of stock, is what I understand.
Right. So, but when you resign from being a CEO,
You can sell all the stock you want.
You can sell off all your stock.
Yeah, you can sell off. Yeah.
So theoretically, if one were to use logical deduction,
yeah,
it could be wondered if CEOs were resigning before the stock market crash so that they would be able to sell their stocks while they were still worth something.
Right. So that might sound like a conspiracy theory, which I think at this point, for me, it is a theory. But I think it could probably move beyond theory with a little research, and I'm not going to do it today.
Do you know who Bob Iger is?
Yeah, he's a CEO of somebody, right?
Yeah.
He's like, wasn't that Disney?
I don't know. Green Day's from Florida. Oh yeah, possibly. Because,
Disney.
Yeah.
He's out.
Yeah, Disney retired. The CEO retired.
So I find all that information. How do we go from here? Oh, China, and why would the U.S. have started something like this? Well, I don't know what's going on. It seems like there was some foreknowledge that this virus was going to be more serious. We've already seen the mainstream internet thread about some of our elected representatives in Washington sold stocks before the stocks fell because they had been in briefings about the virus. So
right, and several of them were like, no, it was my husband's stocks, it was my wife's stocks. Somebody sell those for me, not me. I don't take care of it.
So there were stocks being. So that's small potatoes as far as I'm concerned. Like a few senators were making sure they didn't take a hit for what was about to come before the public knew what was going to come. That seems a little, maybe not the kind of person you want to have representing you. But that's small potatoes compared to the CEOs of some of the largest corporations in the world cashing out. And if they're cashing out, do you think that like 1,600 CEOs deciding that they want to cash out might have something to do with a falling stock market?
In a post-truth world where people are often highly suspicious of any information they encounter, for some good reasons and because of some brainwashing, you can still use the tools of logical deduction to guide your theorizations about why things are happening the way they're happening.
So to me, that's a confirmation of a Kairos. Those folks said, this is an opportune time. There's not a more opportune time for me to check out. So how do we take advantage of this same Kairos? How does, I'm not a CEO, I don't have money to cash in. How do we take advantage of this shift, of this moment in time where change can occur? It's almost like a little magic window where we can redefine things.
Well, things are not going to be the same.
And
the world is never going to be the same. And that's a great tagline for like an independent summer road trip movie. But it's also a great tagline for your life right now and my life right now. The world is never going to be the same. You and I can decide to use our energy to go with the flow of the river of change, or to backpedal for the rest of our lives to try to get back to the good old days pre-coronavirus.
Right.
We have that choice.
We have that choice right now.
We were just talking with our favorite cashier, our favorite Safeway cashier yesterday, Kim.
Yeah.
About how, it's an opportunity for self-examination. Everybody has to stay home more. People are getting to know their spouses better.
For better or worse?
Well, they're getting to know their spouses better.
For better or worse, yeah.
Which might mean that they like their spouse more or they like their spouse less. And people are confronting decisions that they were maybe just going to keep putting off.
Right.
Because we now have time to think.
My friend is a veterinarian, and he says, I guess people are just sitting around saying, I should take my pet to the vet. He said he's been absolutely crammed.
Super, super busy.
He's never been busier.
That's so funny.
So everybody's home with their pets like, well, I guess I should do something. Maybe I should take you to the vet.
Yeah. We haven't gotten Fido checked up in a while.
There's a lot of choices being made right now, so it feels like...
People are having,
There's an opportune moment.
Time and energy when you're not working 24/7 and taking care of your kids 24/7 and going to school 24/7 and dealing with all that stuff. You are actually having time for your own thoughts to bubble up out of your head.
My big discussion today is with a gentleman He works in politics, so he works for an establishment politician, and so his perspective of politics is obviously biased by that perspective, as my perspective on politics is biased by my wanting to see something more productive than our current partisan stranglehold on the system. So this to me seems like this is the part that I'm trying to argue, and then I think this can segue into what we'll give you the floor for a minute. The opportune moment. I see people still talking politics in a pre-virus mode. They're talking about what happened in the primary before the virus and everything that led up to the virus.
Right.
I feel like the virus, as a Chiron, is presenting an opportune moment. People say it's not practical to do anything radical if we're going to, that tends to be the sort of neoliberal, centrist,
Let's
Democrat
not go too
perspective.
crazy.
We can't turn the ship that sharp. We have to do small little things, which means we have to support the centrist Democrat Joe Biden, who's just recently been accused of rape. We'll ignore that.
Right.
Because steady
and all the
as
other
she goes.
Completely legitimate reasons to not elect him to president.
All the other reasons. So steady as she goes. Now, but if you take that argument and you look at what has happened since the virus has been in the narrative, what has happened since? Well, this is shining a light on our healthcare system, on our leadership, on the speed at which government works and how effective it is in protecting us. It's no longer the Russians. Right now it's the virus, and we fell down on the job. We fell down on the job on that one.
Right.
So we're seeing these things, and so that means if you are a candidate wanting to run the country in this new world, because the virus isn't stopping in 2 weeks, if you want to be the person who's running the country, representing the people in the running of the country, you have to be current with what's happening right now. You have to be able to address the emergency. If you're president, you'll have to address the emergency. I don't see Biden addressing the emergency in any kind of visionary, practical plan. I don't see any of that. I see that coming from the other guy. And yet I still see people doing this weird incremental thing when a giant swirling portal has opened up for the narrative to be switched, for something more productive to happen. The things that they think we have to do incrementally, we can do through huge leaps and bounds through consensus, because people are on the beam right now. They are ready to have the healthcare conversation. A little more awake. They're way ready to get involved.
Yeah.
And if you're going to continue down the same path that you've been doing for the last 30 years, it doesn't seem like that's the wisest path, in my opinion.
We can't keep successfully doing the same thing we've been doing. Something's going to change. It might change in kind of a mutational, unintentional, desperate sort of way, or it could change because we take intentional action for it to change.
Mad Dog said BV and AV for before virus and after virus. This is the Chiron that decides what gets left in the past and what we're moving forward with.
Right.
We'll have to give Mad Dog credit for defining the new age.
BV and AV, before virus and after virus. Future governor of Montana, Cory has joined our video this afternoon.
Welcome, Cory. Thanks for playing.
How's your campaign going? I guess probably not much has changed. Cory was running a campaign from Dylan that was insisting upon not raising money just to do advertising. Simple black and white poster of his platform that friends could hand out or post in their businesses if they wanted to.
Right.
And various Facebook posts about his values and things that he hopes to do if he gets elected to be. I think he is running for governor. I'm not sure. As a write-in candidate. So he's like, I'm trying to work outside the current system because the system is broken.
Maybe he can put a link in the comments and people can check out his campaign.
Yeah, do you have a campaign website? Over on Twitch, Green Days says, one Kairos of large enough scale, COVID-19, is creating a ripple effect through the ocean of Kronos we've only known for most of our lives. So now there are many other smaller Kairoses that are reaching out across that ocean.
Right.
And again, it's a revolution in which a participatory choice is one that doesn't exist. You don't get to choose.
You don't get to choose
whether or not You don't get to choose to be a. That's interesting.
Who was that?
Green Dazed in Florida.
Thanks, Green Dazed.
I don't know.
Well, you get to make choices.
I think there are going to be a lot of people that will spend all of their energy trying to not be involved in revolution.
Isn't that a choice? Spending all your energy?
It's a revolution in which a participatory choice is one that doesn't exist.
So you don't get to choose whether you're participating because you're in it. Right? You're in a new age. You're in the post-virus age. You don't get to choose to be a part of the post-virus age unless you just put a gun to your head or something. There's no choice of yours, but you're here.
If you choose
now you can make choices in that world.
If you choose not to be involved in the revolution that will happen, you still have made a choice.
Correct.
Yeah. I will choose free will.
And that's the thing that they say all the time is like, where were you, Dad, when the Nazis were taking over Germany? Why didn't you do anything? Where were you when? And I see that come up a lot in political and environmental.
Very ageist ways.
Well, but also political and environmental ways. Like the idea of global warming or climate chaos. That idea, what did you do to keep the planet from being scorched before I turned 20? What did you do then? And it's often satirical things. I was making mad memes or whatever. This, I think, is a real moment. This is a real moment where authorities shift. Who is considered relevant, who is proven to be relevant, and who is proven to be irrelevant are choices being made right now by people in positions of power. Because you can have somebody like Donald Trump who can lie to his teeth 3 times in a day, the next day say he never said it, even though there's footage of it, and people will still go on. Those are the things that are maddening, which make people think there can't be any change. But a lot of those lies did not have very serious present consequences the way that the choices that are being made about whether or not you're going to give a state ventilators or not. That has a real world implication of somebody dying or living.
Right.
So right now those choices are no longer just like irritating. They're going to be defining. So taking all that, so this is this an opportune time to speak across partisan lines? Is this an opportune time to say, to stop the dialogue of us versus them and Bernie bros and Biden dudes or whatever? I don't know.
Bidenettes.
Bidenettes, yes. Like, we can stop that now and have a different discussion. We could actually change the context of the discussion suddenly, which I think is really, really something to recognize.
Right.
At this time. I'm challenged. And I like the challenge of speaking across these gulfs of ideology. Sometimes for fun, sometimes because it actually does end up being productive and my mind has changed and another person's mind has changed. And when I can connect to somebody on who's in a bubble that's way different than mine, when I can not convince them to come to my bubble or not be convinced to come to their bubble, but to have a communication about what those worlds are, I've gained access to another part of the world.
Right, the bubbles pop together and they don't become one bubble, but you are connecting in that space of connection where the 2 soap bubbles meet each other. You can create a bridge of communication where even though one person really likes the Republican Democrat fighting and the other person really wants us to not have parties anymore, you can converse about your values once you've acknowledged the parts where you disagree.
So I think it's a good opportunity, but I'm having to take this idea of the Kairos, and put myself to the test of like, am I just doing trope-like behavior that I did 2 months ago? Or am I making choices in my communication that reflect this moment of opportunity for different things to occur.
Nate Watson has a comment along that line on Facebook. Why is it up to the people in power to determine who has relevancy? Really, reality isn't being defined by how our society reacts during this time to the individual. Really, I misread that, sorry. Really, isn't it being defined by how our society reacts during this time to the individuals?
That is a perfect segue.
Beautiful.
To the final segment of our show today.
The final segment, it's only 4:40.
The last segment that we do on the show, which is another part of the conversation that we had with meta-modernist philosopher Hansi Freinacht, whose position is that we are, this is the time to not be a consumer of culture, but to be a creator of culture. Society is us. It's not happening to us. So thanks for that little tie-in, because we're going to spend maybe the last half hour of the show.
That. Yeah, we should try.
With playing another section from our interview with Hansi Freinacht.
We'll put it way up next to the camera so you guys can definitely hear it really well.
Very good.
Sean Yardy says, the pretend America is getting checked. When something goes down that we can't shoot at, we are a third world country. He says you're making the best choices, Dark, you beautiful SOB.
Oh, yay.
Help us create, you beautiful people. Yeah, society making. We are society.
So I like that we have to change our perspective. It's no longer about who we elect that's going to save our lives or change our lives or make our lives better. It's about us to make our lives better and making sure that that's enforced by people over there doing that stuff. We have to just change the whole way we're doing things. That's what I've liked about this coronavirus response. Is the most compelling, enlightening information I've received has not been from mainstream media or from governmental agencies. Those have been reactions to the information that I've been getting from friends, family, outside sources, independent sources, and science. They're reacting to the thing. And there's other people that are making choices, informed choices. I forgot, I don't know how we're going to play the Hansi Freinacht thing if we don't, but can we get that little can speaker?
I don't even know where it is.
Okay. We may not be able to do that then, we'll figure it out.
Yeah. I figured we could just play it on your computer, but move the computer near the camera.
Okay.
Because we can put the audio in
there,
later
for
the radio recording. We just want to make sure our live stream folks can hear Hansi talking.
Yeah. So I've been going on a tear and a rant. Any feedback that you guys want to throw on? We are Ainsley's much better about reacting in real time on the post that we have here on the Facebook page.
I do my best to multitask and keep everybody involved in the conversation. We really appreciate it when people leave comments or questions or personal stories that have to do with what we're talking about, or in thoughtful segues. And yeah, so it's a lot of fun. We're here to have these conversations with you guys, and we were doing it before social distancing was cool.
That's right.
That's right. Oh, it's a new tagline.
I want to I want to hear you now.
Okay.
I want to talk about this subject of bubble collisions. I don't always have the ability to make sure that I am clearly heard I don't know how to make myself clearly heard by people in another bubble because of translation problems. I can guess, I can try, but my whole life has been set up with these senses of failure when I write the best response or I articulate the best information packet and then hurl it, and I think
no one can misunderstand this.
And then it comes back and I'm like, what?
They misunderstood it.
They did not hear anything I said, and how much of that is my fault?
Right.
Of not being able to speak in the language of the person that I'm trying to communicate to.
Right.
And how much of it is impossible. That's the part, is like, this is why I sort of shied away from trying to communicate across religious lines and tried to keep it more in a, what do you call the rest of the world when you're a religious person? Not civic, but...
world. It's just the secular world.
Secular world, right? Decided to stick with the secular world a
right.
little more. But you, having recently delivered yourself from a fundamentalist Christian reality bubble are still in communication with people who are in the bubble, people who have left the bubble that you know. And I want to hear about that from you. The struggle.
The struggle is real. I feel pretty mellow today because of the conversations that I've been having with my family over the past week or two. Makes me a little distracted, a little less smiley, I guess. I think Rick Booth's comment really is good. I've always tried to be a survivor rather than a victim. Life is adapting and learning from every experience. And it's interesting you say victim because I've been repeatedly accused over the past week or so in conversations with my 15-year-old sister of playing the victim because I'm saying that I had to get a divorce and leave the church because those things were unhealthy for me. It's kind of hard to frame it in the way that my family sees it. My family is still in a very conservative, reformed evangelical reality bubble where they see the world as all of God's creation about 7,000 years ago. God made everything. He is in control of everything. And in order to get into heaven, they must love him and follow his commands. And if not, they will go to hell when they die, which is eternal separation from being loved. Or
apparently not real pleasant either.
Right. Well, I mean, as a loving person, I find eternal separation from everything and everyone to be really horrific.
My version of hell is a little more Hellraiser, like painful and torture stuff.
Yeah.
But that too.
Yeah. So.
Sorry.
Billie Jean, get out of there. I don't know what you're chewing on, but don't chew on it. Cut that out of the radio show.
Well, you're in a position where you're not only trying to communicate to people in a world that you came from, but also trying to also communicate to people who've never been in that world about why it's so difficult to make that communication. So you almost have like a double role. It's not like you get out of this reality bubble of fundamentalism and now you're with everybody else. Now you're sort of an orphan with people who don't understand why those people are acting that way. You do understand why those people are acting that way. But to try to communicate that to people who've never been in that world is almost as challenging as trying to communicate back to the world that you came from.
Well, and that's what I spend my post-Orthodoxy conversations on, you know, my reality bubble conversations. I spend them on either talking with people who are still Christian of any kind or another, because I was like one of the most intense, conservative, studious kinds of Christians. So like I read the Bible hundreds of times, as well as a ton of other theological books, the first like 27 years of my life. So I either spend time talking with people who... That was glass.
That's a neighbor.
Okay. Talking with people who are in reality bubbles, who are still Christians of some kind, or talking with people who left the church and are just angry at it and think that everyone in the church is bad or stupid because their kind was really bad or stupid.
I'm going to go check with that.
Yeah, maybe.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay. Or with people who were never in churches. And if you've never been in...
Just neighbor noises.
If you've never been in a church or in that kind of environment where your religion is tied into your identity, is tied into your behavior, is tied into whether or not you're going to be loved, then you kind of think that Christians these days are dicks. You know, you kind of think like, why can't they just let people marry who they want to marry and love who they want to love? And it's like, it's not that Christians are being rude and dicks and intolerant about gay marriage. It's that they were told by God, the only real God, that men marrying men or women marrying women or several people being in a relationship together is sinful and unhealthy and will take you away from God forever. And so it's their job, according to the Bible, to go out into the world and make disciples of people and teach them God's ways. And so I do a lot of interpreting, and it's been a really hard 4 years since I decided that where I was completely unhealthy, and I needed to do something else in order to be healthy. My family doesn't see it that way. I hurt them, I hurt my ex-husband, and I hurt the church that I grew up in. I damaged my witness to all the other young women who were married. I damaged my witness to anybody else who was thinking of being married. I broke my mother's heart. I broke my siblings' hearts. They can't trust anything I say or do anymore because I no longer practice Christianity the way that they think you were supposed to practice Christianity. So they never know if what I'm saying is safe. Even if the words seem safe, they have to be careful, because now that I have been tempted away from doing what is right by Satan, I am a vector for temptation. Just like somebody could be carrying the coronavirus without seeming like they're sick and spread it around to people.
You can look really nice.
I can be really
totally
nice
evil.
and seem really supportive and seem really kind, but still be completely untrustworthy and unhealthy and potentially tempt them away. So, for instance,
that's something that can happen. She has sisters, brothers, and parents that see her this way. This isn't like some stranger who was in the church that they knew for a minute.
These are people that grew up with me and spent the first 22 years of my life with those people. Like, I raised those 6 kids.
I think that's the part that people who have never been in a cult-like atmosphere can't even grapple, that somebody could do that to their own family.
Right. They're like, well, yeah, maybe if they just don't know you. But it's people that knew me and grew up with me. So for instance, one of the text messages that my 15-year-old sister messaged me today was that you, Ainsley, you are always being manipulative. You're asking things like, what do you think about that? Or, they still do that thing, referring to my parents. The parents still do that thing. And Ellie, oops, I wasn't going to say her name. My 15-year-old sister is perceiving that as me being divisive, me tempting her away from things she's supposed to believe. And my perception of that is that she feels like when I say, well, what do you think about that? That it's me tempting her away from God and what she's supposed to believe, because what she thinks about it is not what she's supposed to think. And my question is calling up that dissonance, that what she is thinking is not what she's supposed to think. And so that must be me tempting her. It's me insidiously slipping in bad stuff, since I'm now a fallen person. I'm an apostate person.
Right.
So even when I'm trying, and I told her over and over again, like, I've done my best to I don't want to touch your religion. I don't want to mess with your relationship with the parents. I want to be a good supportive sister, but I don't want to pull you away from your faith, because it's your faith and I want you to make your own choices. Like, deep at the heart of it is that I want you to make your own choices. And if your own choice is to continue to practice Reformed evangelical Christianity, then I want you to be making that choice for yourself, because I did not make hardly any of my own choices for the first 27 years of my life. But they still hear, my siblings still hear me as being manipulative, unfortunately. Nate Watson asks, how is your family reacting to the coronavirus? Are they feeling that it is an act of God or a punishment? I don't think that they think it's the end times. My family is the kind of Christianity that believes Jesus already came back in 70 AD and vanquished the Romans out of the temple, and that fulfills all of the stuff in Revelations about Jesus coming back. So they're not looking at wars and rumors of wars or pestilences like the coronavirus as a sign that Jesus is coming back. My father is actually a doctor and my sister is a nurse, but they have a weird mix of reacting to the coronavirus that includes some safety practices and some trusting God. And I don't mean to put that in quotes in a derogatory way. I think faith in things bigger than yourself, it can be really beautiful.
Yes.
And I have faith in things that are bigger, forces that are bigger and stronger and more omniscient than I am. But if you say we're just going to pray and trust in God, and then take my 75-year-old grandmother who has respiratory, I get a little frustrated. I get a little frustrated about that mix.
And I think a lot of people, I'm going to be the sort of interpreter here. I think a lot of people, when they think of fundamentalist evangelical Christians, they don't think of somebody who is a practicing doctor in the world. They
Right.
tend to think that these are trailer trash.
Do they?
Well, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people, when you think people who are still believing that level of Christianity must be what I call neo-primitives. They're almost like so primitive in their world concept because they're locked into a monotheism versus like a more perhaps agnostic approach that allows for new information, new perspectives, new science. That seems very primitive to people, and they can't imagine that you can have that worldview and look like a modern human. And that's the part that I often try to explain to people, is that you have no idea how primitive, and I say primitive on the most dictionary level.
Right.
How primitive.
Not like Stone Age. I mean, they have like a housekeeper and a really nice hot tub.
Yes. A lot of people like are
intellectually primitive.
We have a congressman and a senator
in
who
Montana.
are young earthers.
Right. They also think that God created the world in
6,000
6 or 7,000 years ago, or maybe 10,000.
Yeah. They're dictating our policy, and they think the world is 6,000 years old. Like, I don't think that really sinks in what that means for people who have never suffered that limited view of what's possible in the world.
I spent a lot of time last fall struggling with my creationist upbringing versus evolutionary science. A lot of time struggling with that. I was trained to mock and stop listening to any scientific information or person who said anything like millions of years ago or in the such and such age. We would laugh and then stop listening.
Yeah.
We would fast forward.
It's a cutoff valve.
We would mute. We would black out that part of picture books. We would go to museums, and while reading museum plaques aloud to the siblings, rewrite the words on the plaques as we were reading it to make sure that it included God when God made the world 7,000 years ago, not millions of years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth.
So when you were reading to the plaque to your siblings
Yes.
who could not read,
I was rewriting the museum plaques.
Rewriting the museum plaques in real time and telling them as though it were real.
Yes, because it was.
Your version.
It was real. And it is real to people who still believe
Wow,
those things. That's the way the world is.
That is such a great metaphor for how we do it all the time.
Explain.
Just the idea of like, when you're trying to translate between realms, and you have one realm where people believe in the sort of desert sky god reality and magical thinking, the idea of magical thinking that like that a virgin can have a baby and all that, like all those sort of biblical, like walking on water. There are people who believe Jesus literally walked on water. There are people who believe that, and that is hard for people to grasp, who the last time they felt like something like that was when they gave up Santa Claus when they were 7. And it's hard for people who have a secular view of the world to imagine that those people actually exist, even though they're surrounded by them and they dictate their policy in Washington.
Right.
So I don't know how you can explain that further. Like, the reason I brought that up is because we have these tropes, these ideas of what that person is, what they look like, and how I would recognize them in the world. And I think if you showed a picture of like who your family is and what they do in the world, like your dad as a doctor in the world, you would not think that that's somebody
who thinks that God made the earth all in a week 7,000 years ago.
He knows science. He's a doctor.
Yeah. He
So-
studies the body. And
These are the bubbles that we have to communicate across, and people who've never been in a bubble don't know the challenge of what it's going to take in this Kairos of this moment, this swirling opportunity to communicate across divides. It's a big challenge. How's your efforts going?
Well, like I said, I've had a really mellow week.
Yeah.
I've been in a group chat with my 15-year-old sister and my 11-year-old sister, and occasionally my 19-year-old brother, that my 40-year-old cousin lurks in, because he's kind of always been our older brother. And we've been talking about, it's kind of like the conversation I've been hoping to have for the last 4 years, but I always hoped would be in person. Which is, why did you get a divorce? Why did you leave Christianity? Why did you change so much? Why do you say online that my parents hurt you? And I've just been carefully going through each of those questions and trying to explain my ultimate betrayal of everything that I was and everything that everybody around me loved and believed in terms that they're going to understand, in terms that are going to be bridge making rather than wall building. And Dark gave me the advice to say, try to talk about how you were unhealthy and now you are healthy, because a lot of Christians don't value happiness. Happiness is not the most important thing. It's most important to be holy. It's most important to be holy. And anytime a Christian thinks that it's okay to do something difficult or maybe wrong because they'll be happier if they do it, another Christian is going to come along and say, take up your cross and follow me. To live is Christ and to die is gain. Earth is for suffering and heaven is for redemption. Like, you're not supposed to be happy. You're supposed to be holy. You're supposed to be following Jesus. And
being able to
talking about being healthy,
right?
How my marriage lasted 5 years and I got unhealthier as it went along, and I was very unhealthy by the end of it, which is a great umbrella term for unhappy, unfulfilled, bitter, jealous, sad, tired, sick, and that I did eventually have to make the choice to stop following all the rules in order to be healthier, or stay unhealthy and keep following the rules until I die at 85 next to the same man, so that my siblings are not let down. They don't have a bad example.
The church isn't let down.
The church isn't let down. I don't profane the oath that I made before God.
And bring shame upon your family.
And break my mother's heart. So much shame. My mother is very ashamed of me. And it would be really cool if just my divorce meant then my parents started treating me badly.
Right.
But unfortunately, we've never had a good relationship, and she was always kind of ashamed of me.
Now she has the reason.
But now she really has good reasons.
Yes.
So we've had a commenter on our Twitch stream for a while now, Snow25, who's
welcome to the show.
Been making a lot of comments, and Green Dazed and 710 and 805 were going back and forth with him for a while on our stream, which we can go back and look at later.
Yeah.
Snow25 is coming from a very different worldview than the one that I have, and unfortunately we don't have time to sit down with a beer and talk things through and get to know each other face to face, because I doubt, people say things a lot differently online than they would if you're, having a drink over a beer in the park or the pub. He just said, don't talk crap about your parents, but he used a word we can't use on the radio.
Oh, don't. He's telling you.
Me to
how to behave.
Don't talk crap about my parents.
Oh.
He's also talking about me doing woman things, and talking about me being a retard, and talking about making a joke that our stream is former cult members talk about getting out of a cult while still not knowing that they're actually in a cult still.
Oh.
So I've been keeping track of his comments.
That's going to be distracting.
Oh, he just called it. I'm calling it now, Snow25 says. I'm calling it now. The blonde chick will stop being a hippie in 2 to 3 years, dump the yogi dude, because all this is a type of safari for the sheltered, rebellious girl.
How do you feel about that?
Well, only time will tell, I guess.
It might be accurate.
Oh, she's living through her teenage rebellion as a 40-year-old.
That might be true too.
Yeah, I'm not 40 though. That's the first time I've been kind of sad about someone misaging me. Like, I'm not. Is it the new camera lens? It's making me look older than I am.
Right.
Damn it. But I liked his comment that he said, don't talk crap about your parents, because this is someone who's never met me and doesn't know my parents at all, doesn't actually know what kind of abuse I'm talking about. They could have been beating me in the basement for 20 years for all you know, which has happened to a lot of religious kids.
Does Snow 32 or whatever his name is, do you have any kind of religious affiliation?
Well,
I'm going to start taking bets right now.
On what religion he's in?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
You haven't been reading the rest of his comments. I feel like he probably feels like he's a woke atheist.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to talk about that because what part of our conversation of the big things you're not supposed to talk about, religion and politics, is the public versus private.
Right.
Which I think is really important to talk about. Public versus private is really important. Because we do kind of have this thing where random strangers online think that they have a right to tell me not to say things that are negative about my parents ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an appropriate thing to say. Don't talk about your parents unless it's a good thing. And that's I think that's a long-standing, closely held belief of U.S. culture. I can't speak to other countries because I don't live there. That you're not supposed to say bad things about, one, your elders, or two, your parents.
Right.
Definitely not your mom.
Don't speak ill of the dead.
And if somebody else says something bad about your mom, then you can basically just beat them up without anybody faulting you for it.
Right.
So what's your position on public versus private, Dark?
I feel like there's a currency to politeness. So in order to exist in certain circles, in order to go to a certain bar, let's just say a bar, you go to a certain bar and maybe it's a union bar. Maybe this is a bar full of artists and intellectuals. They have their own culture. And so in that bar, things are permitted that maybe you're not going to be so free with outside the bar. Same thing with families. So like in the family, when you have very strong, narrow religious beliefs that maybe the rest of the world is not in cahoots with, or doesn't really agree with, you have to figure out how to not get into arguments with people in the outside world. So you can say things in the house, but you're not going to say them outside the house. And so I think fundamentalist religion leads to a lot of public-private. And so, which also leads, unfortunately, to the same thing with church and secular, which is why I think there's a big problem with pedophilia in fundamentalist religions, because the built-in system is that there's an authority that you must obey, and often the priest, the parent, is like the local management system for the big management system, so unquestionable. And so when you have these systems where there's an authority that is absolute, and then you have to negotiate in a world where that authority is not absolute, you start having to have two personalities to a degree. With fundamentalist religion, you have this thing where you have to separate your thoughts from correct thoughts, which often causes us to doubt ourselves, doubt our perceptions, doubt our emotions, doubt our senses of justice, because there's an outside force that says you're incorrect. So there's like a built-in filter that doesn't allow critical thought, your own critical thought of a situation, to have weight in the world. So that is where the public-private thing is on an individual basis, and then it happens with a family basis, and then it happens on secular versus religious organization basis. And I think it makes truth very hard to discern. And I think it's part of why we live in a post-truth world, because when you have people who believe the world is 6,000 years old operating in politics, that's he doesn't get up and say that when he's talking about. We actually have a politician, Greg Gianforte. He's a senator. He's a senator, right? He said we don't need retirement because in the Bible people lived till they were 500 years old.
He said that?
Yeah, because he believes in the flood, and he believes that we shouldn't have retirement. Some weird, because there's no retirement program in the Bible.
Right.
So why should we have one in the world?
Weird.
God didn't say anything about a retirement program.
Well, I don't think they also had congressmen in the Bible either.
So they don't say these things often. They do. They get shut down. They stop saying them. And so people don't know that you're dealing with a person that is living in a completely different reality than you are, and he's your representative.
Right. And it informs a lot of things. I'm still finding pockets of things that are informed by my old belief system that I didn't realize I was thinking a certain way because of the indoctrination and brainwashing that I grew up with.
I think public-private is very dangerous because you'll have beliefs that I won't hear from you because you're shielding it in order to interface.
I keep that belief private so that we can have a conversation, but you don't realize that we're not really connecting because I have a bunch of secret beliefs.
That discount everything that you're saying right now, but I'm not going to say it because I don't want to get into it or they do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would rather somebody tell me the thing rather than shield me from the inconvenient reality of their perceptions, So I don't know where we went off on that for.
Well, public-private, the don't talk crap about your parents.
Okay.
That a stranger is telling me not to talk crap about
I don't
parents.
buy into that whole mythologizing of the parents.
They're just people.
Mom's day, dad's day. I mean, they're just humans that had kids.
And this is going to sound really hurtful to people that have good relationships with their parents or who have bad relationships with their parents but still hold out hope that you can have a good relationship. And maybe if I just keep treating them correctly, they will start loving me the way that I need to be loved.
You honor honorable people. You don't get to be honorable just because you pooped out some babies.
Whoa.
You don't get it. I'm sorry.
Whoa.
I'm going to say it.
Whoa.
Every family's a cult. If you got two people and there's another one, it's a damn cult with a public-private reality.
Right. And we're not using cult in the usual pejorative way that all cults are bad, but that you should be aware when you spend time in a house with the same people most of the time.
With shared belief systems.
And you all kind of have the same belief systems, and you all have the same inside jokes, and you all have the same favorite movies. That is literally the definition of a cult. You want those people to keep loving you, so you make decisions to behave certain ways so that those people at least keep loving you. There's a primary directive towards making sure your family doesn't unlove you.
You come from a large cult. You have a church cult, and then you have a large family that never interacted with the outside world, rarely interacted with the outside world. It was you all together in the house, or you all together at the church.
Or
you all together at the grocery store.
Yeah.
So you have a consensus mind pool of things that are going on.
And you're constantly buffering each other both
from
the
the outside
temptation and constantly keeping an eye on each other that you keep behaving correctly.
Right. So that, when I say cult, I mean it is a reality, the definition of a reality bubble.
Right.
Some of that is religious, some of that is cultural, some of it's genetic, some of it's humor.
Mm-hmm. So Snow25 says you don't have to mythologize your parents, but if you talk crap about your parents and they didn't do anything wrong, you are messing up. If your parents are nice people and you're talking smack about them, that's not good. And I agree.
Sure, that seems like an agreeable thing. Don't talk smack about nice people.
Don't lie. I mean, that's just fancy words for lying. If you're saying bad things about someone who didn't do bad things, then you're lying. Don't lie.
Right.
But I am not saying bad things about my parents, who I'm not lying about my parents, and I don't say bad things about them online. I will occasionally, like we're doing on the show, I'm talking about how I did not have a very good time growing up because the religion my parents chose made them treat me in certain ways that were very stifling, very unkind, very judgmental, and it was a lot of conditional love.
Very conditional love.
I had to keep behaving correctly, or I would be loved less. And anytime I did something that my mom found incorrect or personally displeasing, but she was able to pass it off as incorrect, my other siblings would get special favors.
And not you.
And not me. She would make sure to watch a movie with them at home while I was out that I had been waiting to watch with the family.
So that is like textbook cult behavior.
Right.
Withholding love to get obedience.
If I took too long to do my math homework because I was undiagnosed ADHD because she didn't want me to get diagnosed because I would use the diagnosis as an excuse to not work in her mind. If I took too long to get my math homework done, she would tell me that she was going to let me go over to my friend's house that day, but she had to cancel it because I took 2 hours to get my math homework done. And I can have suspicions that I wasn't actually going to get to go to Cassie's house, that she just made that up as an attempt to incentivize me to work faster.
Right.
Instead of helping me get a diagnosis and have a therapist and have medication to manage my inability to focus.
I think honorable people should be honored. I don't think you get to get a pass just because you're a mom or because you're a dad. I don't think you get a pass. I don't think you just automatically get to escape critique.
Or taking responsibility for your actions.
Right. Yes.
That's something that I've, unfortunately, cumulatively, so this week I blocked my mom on social media.
Right.
Just before this show today because I knew we were going to be getting into some more nitty-gritty family stuff.
Right.
She could theoretically still have my brother-in-law who lives in the same town come over and peep on my show using his login information. But I'm hoping that nobody does that. I'm hoping that people respect the boundaries I'm trying to set for myself because my intention is to have an actual relationship with my mother.
You're not just ditching them. You're saying, if you want to talk to me. Don't talk about me and don't spy on me and then spread things out of context.
Because the problem is I spent several times over the last year, I've tried to say, hey, Mom, we have a sucky relationship.
Suboptimal.
It's not very fun. We don't enjoy spending time with each other. I know that you really dislike a lot of things that I've done, and I am realizing that I dislike a lot of the things that you did when I was growing up. I thought I was just being rebellious, but actually you were insisting that I couldn't have my own opinions about things, because of the religion. And I'm not saying it's all your fault. Correct. I'm saying if we're going to have a relationship, we have to talk with each other. And I have to say, so when I was 13, you said this, this, and this, and that really hurt me, and I still think about it. And then she has to say, oh, well, I said that because you had already such and such and such that day, and I was really tired, and I was kind of over it, and I think I was totally justified. And I have to be like, I wish you had done something else instead, because it still hurts me at 31 that you said that when I was 13. And then we can go back and forth and have an actual relationship and do therapy with each other and get to know each other now. But as it is, I have an idea of what my childhood was like, and my mom has an idea of what my childhood was like, up to and including the present, because she still thinks of me as that bad, rebellious, lying person. Only now, especially more so because I got divorced and stopped going to church the way that they think I should go to church. So I've spent the last year trying to have these conversations with her, and she just won't email me back. She won't text me back. She won't email me back. And I've heard too many rumors of stories that she's been spreading about me that are either lies or twisting something that I said to make it sound horrible. And that's
because it's going through the bubble and in theme with
the
what
bubble
we're
where she
about.
thinks I'm a bad person.
Right.
So I must be saying things in a bad way.
Right, because it goes through. Right. So like this idea of you've been making very concentrated efforts to improve communication.
Yes.
Across these reality gulfs. You're perceiving the world differently than they are perceiving the world.
And I want to have a relationship with them.
And you want to have a relationship with them, but they don't necessarily. They're not looking for new information.
They don't need any new information. They know who I am. My mother made predictions that I was going to break my husband's heart from the time I hit puberty and started liking boys.
Right.
And then I did, so she was right.
Right. Self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. So, and yet you're not just writing them off. You're not just saying, well, I found something better. You're actually actively trying to communicate. And so now what might look like you're cutting off communication, to me, feels like it's an effort to increase communication.
Actual real communication.
Real communication.
Yeah. I'm setting a boundary.
Because here's the difficulty for people who don't understand this dynamic. Whenever you leave a reality bubble, especially a religious cult reality bubble, when you leave that bubble, it gets very difficult to communicate back into the place, because you become different to them in a way where if you're a black and white TV and suddenly there's color TV, black and white films don't work on color TV. So you can have a spectrum of perception and benefit from a spectrum of perception, but it's still going to go through a black and white lens when you talk to these folks, and all the colors that you're describing are lost.
Right.
So it's difficult because people who have good relationships with their parents, people who've never been in a cult, it's easy for them to say, well, that seems so crazy. Why would you even mess with it? Except that they're humans. It's your family,
mom.
And you love them, and you would like there to be some kind of relationship.
Well, and unfortunately, over the past year, with all the gossip that I've been hearing about, I've had to realize that not only do my mom and I not have a good relationship, or even a working one where we ever talk to each other, but she is also influencing other people that I love and care about in how they think about me. By spreading her idea of me around to people that know me, and that idea is incorrect, and that's not fair.
So from your mom's perspective, if you're allowed to have free communication with your siblings, that would be a bad move on her part, because she's not protecting her kids.
She has to protect her kids from me.
From the failed experiment. In her mind.
I've been given all the tools and all of the knowledge to know what the right thing to do is.
And you did something else.
I intentionally stopped doing the right thing.
Right.
Therefore, I am dangerous to my own siblings.
Right. So
my parents, in all reality, my parents feel that they don't even know that I wouldn't abuse my siblings.
Right.
Like, they feel like they have no way of knowing where any of my boundaries are anymore, because I've given up on the morality that they think is the only true correct morality.
So if you disagree with one part of that reality, you're out of all of the reality. Everything else is an unknown factor for you. You could do anything if you're not playing that game. So I think it's important for people who've not been through these things to understand that in relation to the theme, the overarching theme of the show today.
Blocking your mom is not fun. Blocking your mom sounds horrible.
Yeah.
I have to send tiny little discreet notes to probably 50 people to let them know, hey, I had to block my mom because I want to have a real relationship with her, and she is refusing to have a relationship with me, but is instead snooping on my Facebook and telling lies to my other loved ones. Because now that I know that she spreads gossip about me, I have to protect myself from her spreading more gossip about me.
Right.
It sounds like a horrible thing to do.
Don't talk bad about your parents.
And my mom doesn't think that she's gossiping. She's heartbroken. She did her best to raise me. She's just trying to do the right thing. And I'm continually breaking her heart, now by blocking her, and now by the things that I'm going to have to email to our other loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
That's the public-private thing.
Right. She's taking a privy of your public profile.
Right.
Converting it into a private message where you don't get to dictate or have any control over the interpretation of that message.
Yeah. Spreading lies to very dear loved ones. So I think I know where Snow 25 is coming from and thinking that I'm being a brat and annoying.
Right.
It sounds like somebody's made some accusations towards him that he feels were incorrect or unfair. Someone played the victim towards him and made his life a living hell.
Oh, yeah, that happens.
And he feels he's getting vibes that maybe I'm doing that to my parents.
Ah, right.
And they can't defend themselves. And to, you know, like, I'm sorry that happened to you, Snow 25. It really sucks that somebody is mistreating you in ways that you feel like you can't defend yourself from. That's horrible. That happened to me and Dark just last year. People that we cared about and respected in the community started spreading lies about us for vindictive personal reasons and playing the victim. And it was really, really exhausting. And it's hard not to get bitter and angry about things like that. In the case of my parents, I think that people should process things that are difficult and unhealthy for them. I would prefer to process my difficult and unhealthy relationship with my mom, but she won't process it with me. And so I believe that I still have a right to process the difficult and unhealthy things inside of me so that I don't spread that abuse on to somebody else. I don't want to be mean or insensitive to other people because I have this built up bitterness and tragedy about how my mom won't talk to me. And so that's why I sometimes post things online that are part of me processing my childhood and things that I've learned about the ways I was treated, and that it didn't actually have to be that way. It was just that way because of evangelical Christianity. But it's very rare, and I would rather have those conversations with my mom. When I did finally make my first very public, my very first post where I actually talked about how my parents and I weren't having a good time and I needed to process, it was after a couple of months of trying to get my parents to talk to me after they had heard a lie about me and then spread that lie around to their entire church and my childhood best friends. And they would not talk to me about it.
They would not be confronted on that subject.
So I made that was kind of the beginning of me acknowledging that things that I'm really realizing this week, that I might not be able to have a relationship with my mom. And I have a right to still have a boundary around my life where she doesn't just get to see pictures of me online or have fuel for her dislike or sadness about me. The last thing I want is for my mom to sit up late at night and watch this live stream and be even more sad about how horrible of a mother she was. Because she did that my whole life. She would just go to bed and be sad about being a bad mother. And I don't want her to keep doing that because she doesn't understand where I'm at right now.
Right.
She doesn't, but so,
it doesn't matter how happy you are or not.
I'm sinful, and so my happiness is moot.
It's moot. And so she failed, and so she takes it. She gets to be the one that gets to be consoled.
Right.
She
tried.
Because she tried her hardest.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really scary and heartbreaking to have to talk about some of these things, but that's what Post-Orthodoxy is about, is our processes, and that these processes and this thinking is possible for everybody to do. You can get to know yourself better, and you do have rights. You have rights in the world. I have a right to not be spied on and lied about by my mother. And that's, that sentence in and of itself, because she would never use those terms.
Of course she wouldn't use those terms.
And nobody in her entire circle of friends or family would ever use those terms. She's my mom. She wants to look at my Facebook.
What's the nicest way to say what you just said?
That my mom is spying on me on Facebook and lying about me?
Yeah, what is she doing from her perspective?
She's just keeping an eye on me to make sure I'm okay, because she still loves me.
But doesn't want to talk to you.
Well, she can't. It's too heartbreaking.
Right. Okay.
It's heartbreaking and it's poisonous.
And then...
my mentality is poisonous to her.
Spreading lies. She's doing what you're doing.
She's just trying to get support.
She's trying to process.
She's just trying to get support from loved ones because it's too painful to talk to me because I am so rebellious and pig-headed that talking to me would be unproductive.
So it seems like you guys are both doing the same thing.
We're at a complete impasse where I want to talk to her, but she thinks it's completely unproductive to talk to me because her talking to me isn't going to bring me back into the church.
No.
And it would be too painful to confront all the mistakes that she made with me growing up It's in the past. It doesn't matter. It still doesn't make it okay that I got a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my siblings were saying is like, you are playing the victim by acting like the way mom and dad raised you is why you got a divorce. You made that choice yourself. You don't get to blame people for your choices, when in actual fact, bad things happen because other bad things happened.
Mm-hmm.
People have bad attitudes or make bad actions or incorrect actions or abusive actions because something else negative energy came into them. If someone is mistreating you, I will pay lots of money to bet that they are being mistreated by someone else. Abuse is a cycle.
Right.
It doesn't come from nowhere. And I'm not. You think of her as being abusive. I struggle with that because I don't think she did it on purpose. She thought she was just trying to love me the way that Jesus told her to love me.
I struggled with that with my own folks because I got to a point where I forgave my parents for anything, all the perceived wrongdoings. I forgave them. After I became a parent, it became like, okay, they were like me. They're just some person that now has to grapple with another human, and they're doing the best they can. I don't doubt my parents thought they were doing the best that they could.
Yeah.
They made choices and then doubled down on those choices.
Right. That's the hard part.
Yeah. I don't doubt that my parents thought they were doing the best thing possible because they feel like they love me and wanted the best for me.
Right.
I don't doubt that intention.
Which they were also making those actions because God told them to treat you that way as their child.
Or that guy in Pasadena was telling them that. The interpreter.
With the voice of God.
The interpreter.
The pastor is God.
You should beat your kids. That was his thing.
Yeah.
They're just little demons that need to be trained to be human, basically.
Well, Sean was really curious about your experience as a father in relation to all of this public-private parenthood.
Right.
Like parents are just people too, but also respect the parent stuff.
Yeah, I was determined not to be my parents. As a kid, I saw my parents. I had compassion for them even as a kid, even as they were abusing me. Because I saw how miserable they were.
Mm-hmm.
They were not having a good time. And so I always thought, like, I'm not going to forget what it's like to be a kid.
I also had that intention.
Yeah, I will never forget because they forgot. They forgot what it feels like to be the little thing in the world
what did that
just
mean
wants
to
to
you
learn stuff. What?
To be a kid? Because to me, when I said I'm never going to forget what it's like to be a kid, I was saying I'm never going to forget what it's like to feel like nobody understands you and nobody's listening.
That's the key, is that like I have a valid perspective because
You're
I watch
human.
things happen. I would watch an argument between my mom and dad, and my dad would say something and I would hear what my mom heard, which was not what he said.
Right. But she's hearing it.
But she would hear something else, and then she would respond, and then he would become outraged, and then the fight would happen. As a little kid, I was watching going, I see where they swerved off the road. But they were so involved in the energy because it wasn't about that conversation. It was about larger crises that were going on, that became the occasion for them to vent on each other. As a kid, I was like, this could have been resolved. I could resolve this if I had a voice as a kid, but I don't have a voice.
You weren't allowed to talk.
Seen and not heard was the thing. So as a kid, I was like, I'm not going to forget this because I know as a small kid that I have a perspective, I have a view, and I have something to offer from that perspective. So I wanted to not forget, and I made it a very solemn promise to myself because it was a painful place to be, to watch people suffering and hurting each other, and to be completely present for it and not to be able to do a thing about it.
Right, because it's not your place to say.
Even as a small child, I still feel the depth of human emotion. And so I'm sitting there watching tragedy unfold in real time in front of me due to a lack of communication. So that's why communication is something that I'm completely obsessed with.
Completely obsessed.
Still haven't been able to resolve it.
The parents?
Just like
or just all communication?
The discrepancies in communication. Two worlds thinking they're using the same language, but different words going into different ears and different thoughts arising than what was intended.
Because
and then fighting happening because of it. So that was the goal, was to not, and that meant me just really not having any desire to get a real job also, because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
spend your whole life doing something you don't want to do because it might get you a better car. That was just something I couldn't subscribe to as an adult because I still wasn't willing to lose the childlike.
Communication is something we talk about. All of post-orthodoxy is about communication. It's about realizing how different we actually are. You can be like, oh yes, people are different, but like they're so heckin' different. Heckin' is like my new favorite PG swear word.
Yeah. Right.
They're so heckin' different. Like when you're having a conversation with another friend, you might both be 30-year-old white women who have grown up in the U.S. your whole life and had Christian parents.
Mm-hmm.
But one of you might be the oldest of 7, and one of you might be an only child.
Mm-hmm.
You two are going to have way different ways of seeing the world.
It's a different cult structure.
Different opportunities, different experiences. You can argue back and forth about which person had more pressure on them. Did the oldest child have more pressure to be a good person because of the example they were setting for the 6 younger ones? Or did the only child have more pressure to be a good person because they were the only representation of those parents in the world? And that's what children are, is representation of the parents.
Right. And if you're not behaving as a good clone, then there's conflict. So I tried to take that stuff. I tried to sort of get in the world of my parents and say, okay, as a guy who now is responsible for a little mind and psyche and spirit and soul or heart or whatever, gut, all that business, now I start to understand the gravity that my parents were grappling with what it means to be a parent.
Right. And
the choices and how those choices are made. And some choices, like one day you turn on the radio and the preacher says one thing that speaks to your particular definition, your particular desperation, and you make a choice, and that's the rest of your life goes down that road.
Yeah.
I understand that in moments of desperation, when you hear information that seems good, medicine at the time can become a lifelong addiction.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the doubling down is so intense too.
And then when you realize, you start to become aware that it's not working, so like you're a parent and you're like, this is the best thing for you, kid, but you see your kid suffering.
Yeah.
And you don't say, maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Maybe I should leave this church.
You just say, maybe I just need to do this harder. And so I have compassion for those things. It's not that I think, like, with this guy on Twitch is saying about don't talk bad about your parents. That's why I have a disagreement with that. I think everybody needs to be held accountable, and that just because you've done something that causes harm doesn't mean there is the whole sort of Masonic order styly way of doing things, which is you can only be held responsible for what you're aware of, for your level of development.
Right.
You can only be held responsible for what you know.
Right. If you don't know you're messing up, you don't know. Should you be held accountable for unhealthy parenting when you thought that you were doing what God literally told you to do?
Right. Right.
And I'm not trying to send my mom to jail.
No. See,
I'm trying to have a conversation with her because she's going to be alive for another 30 years.
I had this discussion with
we shouldn't keep suffering.
When I was driving limousines in LA, I had a discussion with this Muslim cat who was a limo driver, and we were talking about absolute law in religion, and that I said, well, you can only be held accountable for what you know. So, let's say you do something. Let's say you don't know that it's wrong to hit your dog. Because that's the way your dad did it, that's the way your grandpa did it. The dog is a tool on a farm.
Yep.
And that's the way you were treated, so that's the way you don't know that that's wrong.
Right. Because it's a dog, it's a working dog, and if it tries to grab the food before it's okay to grab the food, you got to smack it so that it knows what it's supposed to do, so it doesn't go try to grab something out of your kid's hand.
And if that works and the dog changes its behavior, you feel validated in what you've done, right? But if you come to a moment where you have an empathetic response to the animal, and you realize that you didn't need to hit it to get the animal to do what you wanted, then you're responsible for that knowledge, and next time you hit the dog, that is a sin.
And the problem is that that's where the doubling down comes in.
Yeah.
Because the moment when you realize that dogs are affectionate, and oftentimes very loyal and
Want to do
have
the
a
thing.
desire to please.
Yeah.
That you didn't have to have been hitting it for the first 5 years of its life. Now you have to be aware that you didn't have to have been hitting it for 5 years. You were doing something wrong for 5 years.
That can be a painful thing to take in, so you might as well just go down the road of hitting the dog and forgetting what you already know.
And you use energy to stop being aware that hitting dogs is wrong, and just using energy to push that truth out of your head so that you don't have to deal with the pain and the guilt and the moment where you need to sit down and cry with your dog about beating it for 5 years.
Right.
Which is not a shameful thing to do. That would be a beautiful moment if you could allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to have that moment with your dog.
So these ideas of only being responsible for what you know.
Child.
Yeah. Only being responsible for what you know. One example I gave to this Muslim cat is he's like, it's a sin to hit your mother. So I'm like, well, that sounds reasonable. Yeah. That it's an absolute bad thing.
Don't ever do it.
To hit your mom. So I'm like, but
don't hit the person that birthed you.
Let's say I'm 3 months old and I'm trying to figure out how to use my legs and I kick my mom square in the face.
Right.
I've committed the sin.
I've totally stood up really fast under my mom's chin several times. Like we had like a thing where she was nervous to be around me when I was younger because I was growing so fast, and so I would like jump up off her lap after she was done brushing my hair and like make her bite her own tongue because I slammed into the underside of her chin, or like hop up off of the bench and slam, because I was suddenly way taller than I'd ever been.
Right.
We also had a thing where I would misjudge her. I wasn't paying attention to her going and stopping in the grocery store, and I would run the grocery cart into her ankles because I was looking around.
Right.
Instead of
so you have some skills.
Falling like a duckling.
You have some skills that you're learning. And then you need to be forgiven until you learn the skills, or you need to be forgiven until you're aware, right?
Right.
So that kid, I can understand having some judgment on it if it kicks mom in the face when he's 27 years old. When he's 3 months old, he needs a pass because it didn't know.
Right.
And I think that cascades through everything. When you're a parent and you make some bad moves as a parent, there needs to be some level of forgiveness for yourself so that you don't double down on the bad behavior, rather than actually face that maybe you could have made better choices.
Well,
that's hard to do in fundamentalist religion.
Before you can face that you made better choices, you have to face that you did something incorrect. You let your kid down.
And if that is a biblical thing that you're doing, then you have to face that maybe the biblical thing may not be correct.
Which would introduce a total catastrophic cascading breakdown of how then do I know what the right thing is?
Exactly. And you're told that you don't know what the right thing is.
Only God does.
If you put God into question, then all chaos is unleashed. Because you don't know who to believe or what to do, who's in charge now that it's not the invisible landlord guy.
Right. Snow25 is wondering, are you assuming we give people empty carte blanche just because they're young? Intent is everything. Some people know exactly what they're doing at a very young age.
I think there's something to that as well. I agree with that. I'm not saying carte blanche because you're young. I'm saying you can only be held responsible for what you know and understand to be right or not right.
He's also kind of whatabouting sociopaths. And
right.
So I think some humans on the planet are born with broken, unhealthy brain chemistry.
Or no empathy, anyway.
Which is unhealthy brain chemistry.
For us. May not be for them.
Right. Well, if your lack of empathy leads you to kill small animals and hide them in your backyard and hurt people, then that's a sociopathic tendency. Yeah. I actually know someone who I think doesn't really have empathy, but is actually really benevolent about it.
Doesn't hurt little animals.
A curious, nice person who
doesn't
really connect when other people are having extreme emotions. So like the benevolent sociopath idea. But I think there's a pervasive mentality, and here's, this is bringing up the constant post-Orthodoxy theme, that Christianity is way more involved in modern U.S. culture than maybe you think it is. There's a pervasive mentality that people are probably born bad, and we need parents to train us to not be bad. And then we need God to keep us from not being bad. And we need society,
sheriff,
witnesses to make sure you don't, go mess up, Like, that people's natural inclinations, without, if they didn't have consequences, would just be to go and do whatever was the most selfish thing. And that's a Christian principle. That's a original sin principle, that because Eve gave Adam the apple and tempted him away from doing the right thing, that all humans from then on have been born broken and cannot make correct choices without the influence of God inspiring and requiring them to make correct choices. And that if left to their own devices, if religion was suddenly ripped from the planet, everybody would just start being selfish. And I reject that philosophy.
I don't agree with it either. But there's a big chunk of the narrative that is made up from that. Made up on that premise. So I don't think we're going to have time to do the Hansi Freinock thing.
Yeah.
It's a quarter till. For those of you that don't know what we're talking about, we did an interview with a meta-modernist philosopher, Hansi Freinock, from his home in the woods in Geneva,
Switzerland.
And we ran about 7 minutes of it last week and had a little discussion because it's thick. It's philosophy, and I'm doing my best to understand it and break it down in terms for myself and hopefully for other people as to what maybe the importance of the meta-modern perspective might be, in terms of, rather than just the modernist perspective of looking at the world and pointing at where everything is wrong and broken and dumb, deconstructing. The meta-modern perspective is about perhaps seeing things differently as a co-creator of the world and reality that we live in. And so I like to dwell some on that idea, that rather than just looking at the horrible thing that's happening in politics, or the way that our government is dealing with, or how impenetrable it is to communicate with somebody in a reality bubble, I think it's also important to spend some time on how do we, and I think this is a part of that larger picture. Part of the idea is how do we communicate across borders, and the other part is once you can establish communication, or in the course of the communication, what are we communicating?
Yeah.
Are we trying to sell our perspective, or are we trying to co-create something better for all of us? And I feel like I'm a little tired of the battle, of the partisan battle. I'm a little tired of us versus them trope. I love the feeling of like slamming somebody from my perspective and feeling like I won. But I'm finding that feeling wane because I feel like there's something bigger to be won, which is for me, myself, to be challenged and overcome my prejudices and my inability to connect or communicate with other people. And I think in this little portal Chiron, this little dividing moment between pre-virus and after virus.
BV and...
Before virus, after virus?
Yeah, that's right.
BV and AV. In this time, this is a good time to start maybe cleaning house. We're all stuck at home. We're stuck with our own heads for a little while. Not all of us, but a lot of us. And I think it's a good time to clean house and maybe see if we can find a better narrative. Do you have a better narrative?
A better narrative than just don't talk bad about your parents?
Yeah, a better narrative than game theory, that we all need to get our own first, otherwise everybody else will get ours. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the struggle is it has to be a narrative that everybody agrees upon, or that the consensus agrees upon, because if like 15 people decide, well, we're going to be kind and take care of each other and not hoard resources, but make sure everybody has enough to pay their bills, but everybody else doesn't, somebody's going to get taken advantage of.
Well, isn't this the place where we get to challenge those ideas? Like, this is what I've seen. There's some people who are closing down. Some people are getting more scared and more paranoid.
Super protective because they believe that everybody's out to get them, and the breakdown of society means that people aren't going to have the same influences keeping watch over them to keep them from being selfish.
Right. My perspective from my timeline and from my telephone lines to communicating with people off of Facebook, I'm hearing an optimism around the potential for change. And I'm hearing people doing wonderful things, more than the images of people who are worried about their poopy butts and having to go get toilet paper. More than that, I'm hearing intelligent, kind, compassionate responses to something that is beyond our control. And I think the more that is witnessed and the more that is paid attention to, the more possible something new is more possible, the more that we are faced with this reality that we're not as bad to each other as we thought we were. Now we're also like 2 weeks into quarantine.
In Butte.
We can revisit this conversation in 6 months.
And see how people shook out.
And see how it shook out.
How did people actually behave? Because you do have friends.
Who are buying more bullets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And even though they're turning on people that they know and saying, stay away from my family. Because
yes.
Without society keeping people from being selfish animals,
we will just start attacking each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the world that they live in, which means they're always kind of defensive.
Always.
No wonder you have an ulcer. So Snow 25 and I have been having a little side conversation.
Oh yeah.
Since we're not going to have time to do our meta modern thing,
yeah.
I figured we could pop into that a little bit.
I appreciate Snow staying along for the ride and communicating with us.
A lot of the times when someone joins our conversation that we have a completely different worldview from, they just like drop a bomb and leave.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice to have a continuous conversation. He said it's not hoarding when you want to be more happier.
I think hoarding is excess.
I said proposal because I haven't thought this thought through yet. It just popped into my head and I want to put this out here as a proposal thought, an awareness shift.
Very good.
If you have more than you need and someone else doesn't have enough, then you are hoarding. What do you think of that proposal?
I think there's something to that, and I think you could argue both sides.
Mm-hmm.
I think
if we think of hoarding as intentional, as an intentional purgative, then I don't really like that word.
Right.
I think if you have more than you need, and you were aware that someone else doesn't have enough, and now I think people need to understand, like, not very many people in the U.S. have more than they need.
No, I think I would look at those CEOs that are resigning from all the major corporations. I would look at them as hoarders. What are you going to do with $6.5 billion?
Right, you had to resign so that you could cash in all your stock as a non-CEO, just in case you suddenly didn't have that anymore.
They're hoarders.
They're hoarding money. There are people on the planet who have way more money than they will ever use in their entire lifetime for all of their loved ones combined. Even if they all got to take a perfect amount of holidays every year until they died, they still wouldn't be able to use all of that money. And then there are people in Butte who are living on the streets in the wintertime when it's 30 below zero. Mm-hmm. Those people are hoarding resources. They're hoarding money. I think that's incorrect.
I think it's incorrect. I think other people might agree with it.
And I think there might be some cynical people out there who aren't having a very good time.
Yeah.
And don't like the idea that somebody else might have a better time when I can't have a very good time. Like the people that are mad that there might someday be student loan debt forgiveness, but they already paid off their student loan debt. That's not fair. Mm-hmm. It's not fair that somebody else might not have to pay off their student loan because I paid mine off.
Somebody might have an easier time than me.
So those people are not having a good time. They're not very happy, and it makes them cynical. And so there might be some cynical people that say, like, what, you just want everybody that's worked hard and has lots of money to just give it away? And I'm kind of like, yeah, I think the whole planet would be having a better time if the people
different value system.
Who have more money than they will ever be able to spend on themselves or their loved ones in their entire lifetime could get rid of the extra and give it to people that don't have enough to be alive.
I want to make a note. It's 5:53.
That's true.
We probably should wrap it up if we're going to squeeze this into a radio show for Thursday.
Right.
We didn't even take a break at the top of the hour.
Yeah, we have to put our sweet, sweet intro in.
Yeah.
We're very grateful. Very grateful to Sean Yardy, our very first Patreon.
Let's just do a wrap up so we can end the show and then we can do a post or whatever. We can continue on for a minute and wrap up anything we want to. For folks that are listening to this or watching this on Twitch, YouTube, or Facebook, this will be have a bumper in the front in the beginning, an intro and an outro, and you'll
Thanks
be able.
Thanks to our voice actors and Frank Pascal for doing the music.
Yeah, and we will have this up Thursday. Now we only had a 1 hour slot on Thursday, so I don't know how we're going to squeeze a 2 hour show. I haven't talked to Clark about that.
We'll have to bribe the general manager.
We'll have to figure it out. But this show, in whole or in part, will be Thursday 4 to 6 on Butte America Radio. We do have a podcast page that is waiting to be populated, and due to this time of quarantine,
we have more time to do that now.
We're going to take all the things that we've done, clean them up, and put them online on the podcast. There will be more information about that forthcoming. For the sake of our radio program on Thursday, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you everybody who participated in the dialogue online, and we will be back in recorded form on Thursday and also live in this form on Thursday from 4 to 6.
So for those of you that are on the live stream with us right now, we'll be having our next live stream from 4 to 6 p.m. on Thursday.
Yeah, so I think we should wrap it up, and then we can keep talking offline.
That's probably plenty enough wrap up. What else do you want to keep talking about?
Thanks for listening to Post-Orthodoxy with your host, Ainsley Sevier, Dark Sevier. And thanks for supporting community radio on KBMF 102.5. And we'll see you next time.
End scene.
End scene.
Okay. Thanks, Sam.
So now that we are no longer doing a radio show.
Okay. We can say
there
swear words.
Now we can open it up. Is there anybody out there who's been involved in the dialogue that feel like they didn't get their questions answered, comments regarded, or voices heard before we wrap up this whole thing?
Well, I'm really curious.
We'll give the people a moment to populate the feed with that.
I'm really curious because Snow 25 was really seriously like, I think he really is coming from the perspective that we shouldn't share the wealth around, you know?
Yeah.
And I understand that sounds kind of entitled, like, because people think someone with billions of dollars must have worked hard to have billions of dollars. That's the lie that was fed to us over the last century. The great American dream is that if you work hard, you will have more money. You will do better. You will have a better life if you work hard. And that if you see someone who does not have a very good life or doesn't have enough money, they haven't been working hard enough.
I think some people think of redistributing wealth as taking money from people who've worked for it and giving it to a bunch of losers. That's the way it's
That's
interpreted.
the perception.
I think when you are a person who has maybe been fortunate enough to get in, like Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a guy who happened to get in early on a thing and define a industry, and capitalized on that on getting in early. I think that's wonderful, great. He's done something that has benefited humans. We now have this technology. We have grown as a species. It's not just a toy we got to play with. We've grown as an entity, as a species. So yes, he should be able to enjoy the fruits of that. But when it gets to the point where you have untold billions of dollars, it's not that you just give it to a bunch of poor people. Like what he's doing is some say that a lot of his work is philanthropic. He's out trying to figure out how to reduce disease, and that's, I think, admirable. When you have somebody like Bezos, who's like the richest guy in the world that looks like a Bond supervillain, and he's started a website to help pay for his employees' overtime or something, like when he's got all the money in the world, that to me is sociopathic and hoarding. And what could be done with that money? Well, it seems like you do something for the world. You do something for society. You help spearhead infrastructure. You do things that will benefit, help give people a leg up. Create some kind of way so that people who want to go to college can afford to go to college that can't go to college. It's not just giving money away. It's about taking that wealth and figuring out how to get everybody up the ladder with you.
So that the whole planet could be healthier.
Have a better time.
Yeah.
If everybody's having a better time, you'll have a better time.
Imagine how much less crime there would be if people always had food and shelter.
So that to me is like, that's what redistributing wealth looks like. It means having a less, stop glorifying hoarders. What does it mean to have $32 billion? What does that even mean?
Well, Snow 25 really does think that billionaires work all the time. I think maybe you should look at one of those charts that breaks down how much millions are in a billion, and then divide that by like an hourly wage, even a really great hourly wage, like what an emergency room doctor gets, which is like $375 an hour in some places. Like even if you divided a billionaire's wealth by an emergency room doctor's wage, and then had him working all the time with, I'm assuming, reasonable amounts of time for sleeping and eating and sex, that he still would not be having $1 billion. People with billions of dollars is such an enormously large amount of money that we can't conceptualize it without graphs to help us understand. That person is not working harder in proportion to the amount of money that he has.
No, it's a game system.
Yeah.
It's a game system. And we've been taught to worship billionaires. And there's a disproportionate number of sociopaths in the higher echelon positions of power in the world. And I think that's, like, if you look at Bezos, he's an interesting cat, doesn't seem to have any empathy whatsoever. It's really about, he's like a human calculator. He's just making the number go up. That's his game. How do I make the number go up? I found a way. I'll buy that store and I'll make the number go up. I'll do this and I'll make the number go up. It's just a game. It's a video game. It's not working hard. It's being able to exercise your sociopathy to a point to create feedback, a feedback loop. You have money, you can make more money. If you have more money, you can make even more money. That's just creating a feedback loop that is like a cancer. What does a cancer do? A cancer is cells that keep replicating themselves to the point that they kill the organism.
Right.
Cancers are not eating the organism. They're not there taking away from the organism. They're producing so much that they overwhelm the organism and kill it. People who are hoarding billions of dollars are creating feedback loops like cells overproducing, making cancer. They're cancers on society using that metaphorical model. That's my perspective. It's not even on the show.
It's not even going to be on the show.
Just for you guys.
It's exclusive Facebook content.
So,
No, and Snow 25 he's kind of demonstrating all the tropes of somebody that lives in the American dream bubble. If you work harder, you will have more money. If you don't have very much money, then you haven't been working hard. Billionaires have worked hard enough to equal billions of dollars.
Yeah,
billionaires have billions of dollars because they worked billions of dollars harder than someone who only has $1 million. It
doesn't work that way.
It is not true. And that giving people money just won't solve things, and 1 billionaire is a drop in the American GDP. And so it's just kind of, you just regurgitating. I mean, you need to take a look, my friend, and I'm going to say this kind of harsh style because we're off the radio. You need to take a look at which thoughts you have are actually your thoughts that you've actually researched for yourself. Because
that's another point that we've made on the show. A lot of people have these tropes that they say that they think are their thoughts because it's their perspective, but they don't know where the perspective came from. Like, I like to use how you're going to pay for it perspective.
Right. But how are we going to pay for Medicare for all?
Well, you Google, how do you pay Medicare for all?
And then
there will be a plan. But people don't want to do that. They would rather just do the trope, right?
Well, or they just don't realize.
It goes with an identity.
They just don't realize that they're repeating something without checking their own facts.
Are they through talking to us, or do they want to say more things?
Snow 25 says, no, you need to have a look at which thoughts are your thoughts that you've researched for yourself, because the idea of American dream bubble is a left-wing idea.
American dream bubble, what's that?
I don't know. I don't know, I'm not sure. I feel like we've had a really great show today, and I'm really grateful to everybody that tuned in.
Should we quit while we're ahead?
I feel like we should quit while we're ahead because I'm liable to get sarcastic.
I was getting ready to make cocktails.
I would love cocktails. I'd also like to stop yelling. I've been yelling a lot.
Bring it down.
Well, but I mean, like, I've been yelling to try to get the sound to the people on the microphone.
I know. The tone of our show has changed dramatically when we stopped having microphones where we can use our super sexy voices right here that close.
I just don't want to be sarcastic. I don't want to break down the great conversations that we've had with Snow 25 all day by just laying into him about his belief systems, because I'm not going to change his belief systems.
Will that be productive?
It won't be productive.
Can we ask Snow 25 if he enjoyed being a part of the show? Did you enjoy being?
Get him, Billy! Get him, Billy! Ah!
Jesus! Hey! Oh my God, that's my cord.
Get him!
Jesus!
Billy Jean, get Tulsa! Get him! Go get him! Get him! Get him!
I guess that's the name of the show.
Billy, get him! Get him, Billy! Yes! Running!
Bye.
Running around! I think that's the end.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you next week.